Hi everyone, I'm Suma and this is Noel. He speaks about non-duality and is currently running non-duality group sessions via live streams. Hi Noel.
Hi Suma, nice to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for making this happen. I was really looking forward to talk to you. I think it would be nice to first begin with your background. I would love to know how you got started and what got you interested in spirituality in general.
Okay, yeah. So I guess going way back, I learned to when I was in college. I learned to meditate, and I would say that started my interest in just, I guess, finding peace, in whatever ways were there. And then, but I didn't think much. I didn't really actually think much about spirituality or anything along those lines. I sort of meditated to meditate, found interest in Zen and just in the simplicity of Zen, and was living in San Francisco and would go after work and meditate at the San Francisco Zen Center. And I liked the sort of non-seriousness of it, some of the joking and the koans and things along those lines. But then I had a couple of, I guess, what people would refer to as glimpses. And this is before I knew anything. I didn't even know non-duality was like a thing, as a topic, or whatever people, however people want to define it. But just these glimpses into what I always say are sort of what might be really going on around here, for lack of a better phrase. And that increased this curiosity, these insights that came up. And so I guess, I say everyone's seeking. We're all seekers. We just are looking for that wholeness, this home, this peaceful place, in a lot of times in success or in objects or events, relationships, things like that. And then I sort of decided to set out and figure out what this was. What were these little hints that you got of what might be going on around here. And through searching on YouTube and then reading some books, I discovered a lot of different, I say, speakers and authors specifically about non-duality. And then, the phrase "head in the tiger's mouth" is pretty accurate, because then I was just determined to figure out what it was this thread, this energetic thread that everyone was talking about in all these different ways. I wanted to know what it was. I had to know what it was. And then it just clicked. It just all of a sudden made sense after, we're talking hundreds of books and hours and hours and hours of watching videos and listening. It just all of a sudden made sense in this beautiful but yet very ordinary and simple fashion. I know that awakening stories are interesting to people, and they were certainly interesting, in that way. But it just was a couple of these like, and then the I guess that when the page turned, as people say, or whatever, it wasn't this angels and trumpets, like floored and can't move situation. It just was an understanding, a knowing that I can only define as more instinctual than through knowledge and intellect. That it had always been this, and then it was just laughter that as if I'd been looking for so long for my glasses, and then realized that they were just on my head the entire time. So this idea that I'd been seeking this thing and looking over it the whole time, and that it I was never separate from it. It was never something outside of myself that needed to be found. And it was obviously beautiful, but also I just thought really, really funny. Just hilarious, actually, that there was just so much energy put into finding out what it was, and then I guess, the cosmic joke is states it perfectly, because that's how it ended up feeling, is that I didn't need to be looking for anything the whole time. It was just here. It was here, and I am it, and we're all it. We're not anything separate from it.
I think sometimes it's interesting to know about the seeking days, because a lot of people can relate to that, especially if someone is seeking ardently. Was there periods for you where it got really frustrating, where you were listening to some of these videos for hours and still it was like you were trying to there? What was that frustration like? Was it very difficult? And was it like a long period of time where you went through that?
That's such a great, I love that question. Yeah, so it wasn't necessarily a long period of time, but there was this, the character of Noel sort of fancied himself someone that could figure out stuff. Like I would say, I'm scrappy. If I wanted to figure out how to do something, then I would just do it. So there's no academic prowess here. It's just when there was an interest in something, that I could figure it out. And there got to be this really, really a lot of frustration at one point, because it just was one of these things where it seemed that there was this, like I said, energetic thread that was being discussed, and logically, intellectually, it seemed that was all understood, and yet there seemed to be this gap that couldn't be crossed. And so I hit one point with it, and honestly, I think it'd be more interesting if it was more dramatic, like I was in tears, and I know that people have that in terms of suffering, but I basically I kind of made this deal, like all these small s selves made a deal, and it was I was sort of Noel was this self-help, motivational, every day needs to be better than the rest, visualize the thing that you want, type of person, type of character. And so when it got super frustrating, I made this deal. I said, look, can we at least, all of us here, these thoughts that are arising, having these conversations with each other, can we at least agree that the person that you are, the peace that you have, arises so much more frequently now than when you woke up every day feeling like you needed to be better. And if you weren't better at the end of that day, then something was wrong, or you didn't do something right. Can you at least just agree that this is better than, that this knowledge that you have is better than when you thought everything needed to be improved upon? And as soon as that happened, I've mentioned this story a couple of times, but just even saying the story again, there's this feeling of relaxation, because I remember, there's a memory of that energy. There's a memory of the energy of all of those days of feeling like, I needed to be positive, and I needed to strive for happiness. And when that happened, part of that deal, I guess you would call it, is that it wasn't like, okay, well, don't read the books. There was no deal that said don't read the books, don't watch the videos. It was continue to do whatever it is that you're doing. But I sort of loosened the white knuckle grip that I had on the seeker bus, on the steering wheel. Like, I need to figure this out now. And then peace came easier after that. And it still took some time afterwards. But I wasn't so hard on myself that it needed to happen. And I would say that that any interest that arises about sharing this message, or with this new project that I'm working on, with like promoting others, speakers and authors that are doing it, it's really a true compassion and an interest in helping people find peace while they're in the waiting room, while they're sitting there waiting for this thing to happen. Because I can see, you can see that you can see a lot of frustration and a lot of in some cases anger and pain and suffering that's going on because of there's that same gap that exists. It's a parent gap that's like, okay, I know what you're saying, I get what you're saying, and it's always what you're saying makes sense, but or I know that I'm not a separate person, but, and then the mind has created some other hurdle that needs to be jumped, or bridge that needs to be crossed. And the trick is that once that hurdle is jumped over, once that bridge is crossed, it just kicks the can down the road. It moves the goalposts, and it comes up with some other thing that needs to be reconciled or figured out. So, and I explained this to someone on a call once, and she said, "You made a commitment to being," and I thought that was a great way to describe it. I was like, "Yeah, that's it. I just made a commitment to just being." And when it was going to show itself in whatever that way it was, then it would, and then it did. But not it as a separate thing, from me. It's just it's hard because you can't say the teaching or the knowledge or the information, and you can't really describe what the unit of information around instinct is. I can't anyway. But the truth revealed itself in that way, and it just it all made sense. And what really made sense is that I don't know anything. I didn't discover or find out anything, and I don't know anything, and that used to create some fear. That not knowing anything. Life is here, and we're supposed to figure it out, and that's what we're doing. And these are the things that we've been taught. We got to be crushing life. We got to be getting after it. We need to be doing all these things. And the most beautiful thing about it, this miracle that just is happening, and nothing needs to be figured out or discovered about it at all. It's already everything that it needs to be. It doesn't mean that that it's wrong to explore or be curious or ask questions. Nothing wrong with that. It's just that acceptance and true welcoming of the mystery has brought so much peace. Yeah, so I hope that answered the question, but.
Yeah, I feel like not much has been talked about that waiting room. That phrase can be quite frustrating to be in that waiting room, and that's why I asked about your seeking phase, because at least it gives some kind of relatability for some people. That how many years would you say that seeking phase lasted for you?
Like hardcore, about a year, like where it was just, and it's again, these are just like stories, but there was even different sort of waves or inflection points for where things were. Like there was a point for about a month where there was so much fear that I wouldn't, and it's just the mind. It's just the mind, the ego, whatever you want to call it, is just sort of, it appeared to be, it was as if it knew it was going to be out of a job soon. So it was creating a lot of trouble. Like, whoa, this that peace that you're seeking that we're seeking here seems pretty great, but what if you don't care about your family? What if you don't care about work? What if you don't, what if, and just kind of to try to drum up trouble in that way. But it just, it was never going to win that game. There was so much energy in that. And I should also say that the mind still tries. It's allowed, because thoughts, we don't control our thoughts; they're just arising, and so it will still make these attempts. And I just assume that may always be the case. It's just there's sort of a glass ceiling on how much stickiness, how much trouble it can create, because it doesn't go on for very long. Until it's once again seen that it's just part of the game that it's playing. But yeah, I would say probably about a year would be accurate.
And would you say that there was that one moment when it collapsed, or was it like a gradual chipping away kind of a thing?
It felt like a gradual. It felt like a gradual thing, but then it was like there was just one day when all of a sudden it was kind of like I've even described it as in the 90s they had those eye trick posters. You squint your eyes, and then if you stare at it some funny way, then all of a sudden the dinosaurs appear, or an astronaut, and some people just go, and they, oh yeah, I see it, and then some people are like, what are you talking about? It's just this blurry mess, and then you sit there and you stare at, some people are like, I can never get these, and then you then all of a sudden it reveals itself and you see it, and then even if you look at it again later, it may not show up, but then it will appear again. At some point, you look at it and it you can't not see the dinosaurs in it. You cannot not see the astronaut or whatever the scene is that's going on. And so, yeah, I would say, and I also in regular conversations, I think that it is more of a process, that sort of an unfolding that happens. I don't, someone that I know that had the big rain down thing, it didn't work out very well. Like, meaning, it was bad. Like, there's so much fear for that friend to even go back or consider exploring anything along these lines, because it was so heavy energetically. That there's a memory of a lot of fear, and yet I think that those make for great stories. These huge mystical enlightenment experiences, these I could say energetic experiences that take place. Getting hit over the head with it. I don't think that they're not better or worse, but I think that sometimes those can come with. Those can come with some follow-up energy that's also creates a little bit of resistance.
And this is not an experience, because experience is something that comes and goes.
Yeah. None of this is an experience. The mind, until the mind gets a hold of it and it labels it as such. The mind will say, oh. And so this is all just this. It's just this. It's just happening. It's not. And this experience starts, and then this other, and then it stops, and this other one happens, and it gets tricky. So yeah, I appreciate that you said that, because it's not like, even when you call it a glimpse, it sounds like some event and something that happened. It's apparent. It feels real. It felt like something was being, like something was being revealed or shown. in those instances, and they may be described as events or experiences, but those are just stories in the same way of last night I had gelato with my family after dinner. That was just gelato. I didn't do anything. There was no Noel as a separate being that was having gelato. Gelato was being eaten. It was it was just a happening. It was just yeah. So but to discuss it and talk about it, we have this problem with language, and language is dualistic, the subject object relationship. So we describe it as like, well, then I was doing this, and then this other thing happened, and then we had dinner, and then we had this. So it sounds like that, but this isn't an anything until the mind decides to create these words to explain the apparent activities in the illusion.
And when that scene happened, I'm sorry, I may be using wrong words, but I think you'll understand my question. But when that thing happened, was it done, or was it like, because sometimes ego comes and goes, it can especially in the initial phase, I think there is like a lot of like mind still tries to grab you and put you back into that identity. Mm-hmm. Did you go through such a phase, or was it like once it was seen?
So what you're describing, I think some people call oscillation, like I have it, now I don't. That accurate?
Yes, that's
yeah.
a good point.
Yeah, that definitely took place. And like I said, when I said that there's just an acceptance that the mind will never really stop, like trying to inject its opinions, observations, viewpoints, and the mind's not real. It's just another thought or bundle of thoughts that look to be in this localized place. But yeah, that happened especially there was a period of time, I would say, for like a month or so after, maybe it wasn't even that long, where I was like, I really thought I needed to save the world kind of thing, and it wasn't like I was going on Facebook or social media and be like, hey, guess what, do this. But I certainly was, there was this feeling as if I needed to share this with loved ones, because, and I just look at that as the Noel character energy, kind of wanting to talk about and be a cheerleader and a promoter of good stuff. But luckily, I guess, if you want to call it that, those conversations didn't go over very well. At the best, I would get this like, well, at the best, it was just sort of like, oh, there's, Noel's this positive guy, so he's just trying to, be positive and tell me that everything's going to be okay. And then at the worst, not even at the worst, I don't know, best and worst is not really anything, but there was sort of like, oh, this like, even not in condescending ways, but almost as like pat on the head, like, oh, there you go again, saying positive, positive things. But that oscillation, I always say there's this isn't this is not an escape, it's an invitation. And so forgetting in moments throughout the day, and getting lost into the character and this play of life is not only allowed, it's enjoyed. Like, why not get lost in this character's movie for a little bit? When we're watching a movie, and all of a sudden, it gets intense or whatever, and our hands are clenched or we're curling up our toes. And when the movie's over, we go, wow, that was a really good movie. Like, I felt what the character was feeling. And I view this the same way. There's no interest in correcting any behaviors that happen where I'll get lost into the character of Noel, or I get upset or frustrated or angry. There's no running behind the scenes to make that not happen again. It doesn't last very long, though. It doesn't go on for a day or days or weeks. I don't time it either, because I don't really pay that much attention to like, oh, there it goes again. I guess if someone was sitting there, with a clicker and was saying, okay, so now he's the character, now he's realizing he's not, now he's the character, then that might be something that someone could pay attention to, but it's not. There's no interest in hang time for being the character or not being the character. It's just never seen for very long that the character is a thing. And yet playing the role of the character, playing in this life movie or whatever you want to call it, is fine too. And fun sometimes,
This question is kind of like a mean question. And everyone has a different way to describe what is. How would you describe it? What's your flavor of describing liberation?
That's a good question. I don't think it's mean, because I see so I with some other people, we started the Nothing Conference, and then started and then that turned into Nothing Media. And so in that regard, it's funny because we are, I don't want to say forced, but that we talk about the flavors of non-duality. And so they're not categorized on in how it is that we describe them in any way, but wanting to be good, I guess, curators of content. I don't know how then we'll look and say, okay, these people fit into like no concessions. We call them no concessions, like the chopping off of the heads of things, like no one happened, nothing's happening, this isn't anything. And then there are different different speakers and authors. So we don't use, and I don't have any problem with it. We don't use like gurus or sages or anything. We just say speakers and authors, kind of keep it neutral in that way. But then there are some that are what I would call more like integrated. So that are talking about what is, but also in this integrated way. Like, okay, so now we know this is a game. What are we going to do with the game? So to speak. If I had to describe, I've heard things like cheerleader, like or just like positive like. Also, I think there it seems to be a resonance with me saying, you can't do this incorrectly. You can't do this wrong. Like everything is okay. Everything is okay as it is. It can't be, you're perfect because you can't be imperfect, because there's no such thing as imperfection in the absolute. It is perfect. It can't be any other way. So I totally didn't answer your question, but I would say if it had to fall in the more of like in one thing, it would be more of this like integrated approach, because like I said before, and I've mentioned, I was talking to someone last week and saying I went to a memorial for a young man several months ago. And it was beautiful, and there were tears, and the mother was saying she was in through tears was saying, I didn't know that death could bring so much love. And it was this beautiful experience. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, why would we not lean into this human experience versus walking around and being like, this isn't real, or walking up to people and saying, hey, don't worry, he didn't exist and neither do you, and see how that plays out. Like, that doesn't seem, that doesn't seem, I was gonna say interesting, but it also doesn't seem like a very fun or nice thing to do at a memorial for someone. But the beauty of it was seeing everything as it was, as this appeared to unfold, and leaning into the human experience of that, and seeing and witnessing and observing and being sorrow and sadness and laughter and joy and all these things. I don't there's just not that much of an interest here of trying to negate the this thing that's happening, and keep noting that it's not a real thing, even though it's seen that I guess viewpoint or way of learning or understanding, listening, reading might be helpful to some people, but there's no one for it to really be helpful to. So that ends up being part of the illusion as well. So I just feel like, why not lean into this? Why not explore and see what there is to it? Nothing needs to happen. Nothing more needs to be. It doesn't need to be anything else. It can't be anything more than it already is. So why not just observe all of it in this apparent unfolding and enjoy the ride, so to speak, rather than walking around and with the pointed finger and correcting people that are speaking about it in certain ways. If someone says, I read the Bible every day and I'm going to go to heaven, I give them thumbs up. I'm like, do that. Like, find peace in any way that arises, because there's no judgment on any of it. So to say that one person is speaking about it incorrectly and another person is being more of a purist about it is really of no interest to me. And yet I would say that let's call them fans of non-duality can be some of the biggest snobs there are when it comes to how this is talked about. And I think that's I was gonna say, I think that's cool too. I just think it's funny because there isn't an incorrect way to talk about it, and there isn't a correct way to talk about it. So yeah. did that describe it?
Yes,
That's like
yes. I think
okay.
That's a really good observation, what you pointed out, that about like certain style of communication, it can be like that, where it's more of no concession, as you said. It's all about pointing to nothing. And there's also this other style of communication, which is more integral, which will point to both, that there's nothing, but there's also everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, yeah, I too more lean towards the integral kind of communication, because I feel like sometimes there is a tendency to, although that may not be the intention, but it gets processed as nihilism.
Yeah, it does. It gets processed that way, and also and the other thing is that even in listening to feedback of some of the speakers that we have, that we have on, it's some of them people just love, and end up being kind of hardcore in that school of thought and the no concessions side. But then we will get feedback of, hey, I think that's useful, but I really like we just had Joan Tollefson spoke, I think it was last week, for one of our live meetings, and we got a lot of really good feedback from that, because she's just sort of authentic and I don't know if it's like approachable, but just sort of, she's cool with talking about the character, and things like that, and telling these stories. And I think that's interesting. But again, there's no real like judgment of one way that's spoken about it or another. But there are preferences for some people. Like I really resonate with the way that person speaks about it. And so if they write a book, I'll read their book, or if they have a meeting, I'll attend their meeting, or I'll watch all their videos. And that same thing, happened as well. Just for example, I'm always kind of reading a non-duality book, but I don't really watch any videos. But I just love listening to Alan Watts. I love listening to just to hear him talk. And I think one of the things that I end up liking about the things that he's talking about is, first of all, there was such an academic approach, so much knowledge about all these different ways, and he did in some of his lectures mention non-duality, but for the most part, it's just a thread that exists in all the ways that he's discussing things. So, but yeah, it seems that, and we'll find out as this moves forward, what there is a bigger preference from some people, but we just do our best to try to offer as many different things, as many different speaker types as we can, because there's a lot.
What would you say to someone who is in that waiting room, who has watched a lot of content and who has read many books, and like their thoughts are exhausted now, and now they are just waiting for something to happen? They feel like they're almost there.
I mean, I get this question. I get emails a lot about this. The first thing is it would be just to breathe, just breathe and focus on that. I know there's always this temptation to say, well, there's nothing you can do, there's nothing you can do. So, but I don't like saying that, because I know that creates frustration. There's not really an interest. And yet the saying of it just happens anyway. But the other thing is that looking and seeing and realizing that all thoughts arising, if it's helpful to give the mind a character, to call it the ego, or call it a friend of mine used to call it like the little buddy, he'd say, oh, there's a little buddy. Just that all points of resistance, all anything that's saying we need to get there, or we're almost there, or we are there, is just a thought arising. And so it's really a call to, can you allow thoughts to arise and just be? Can you see that they're not coming from anywhere, that you're not in control of them, that they're not yours, there's nothing's personal, but can you continuously allow everything to be as it is, over and over again? Can you find that space of allowing? And speaking of preferences, there are different preferences for words, whether it's surrender, welcoming, allowing, acceptance, asking as those thoughts arise, like, what now? What do I do now? What's next? What else can be done? Then it ends up being a question: can you just allow? Can you be okay with this? Can you be okay with just being? And even that feels like even as I say it, it feels like a trick or a trap, because you either can or you can't. That's either enough to give a little bit of peace, or it's like screw this guy and what he's saying. I'll go to the next person that, that's giving out tips and tricks or whatever, or giving out, sharing techniques or things that should be done. I don't tell. It's funny because I try not to tell anybody to do anything, but I also would say like you should meditate. Like, I'll just say it. You should meditate. If you don't meditate. And people are like, oh my gosh, you told someone something to do, but you said to do that. And this is like really the first time I've ever said it. But like, if you can't sit quietly with your with your thoughts, like for a few minutes, then what do you think it's going to be like when like, how are you going to find that peace? Is someone gonna have to, like, are you literally gonna have to get hit over the head with this to understand that this is all there is, and that the thoughts are going to continue to arise? They don't stop. It's not that all of a sudden this becomes crystal clear and then the thoughts are like, nah, never mind. We tried, and now bye, we're done here. They continue. I saw a great Muji quote a couple weeks ago, and it said, "The mind is not your friend, not yet." And I was like, that is right. That is a perfect pointer. The mind is not your friend, not yet. So until you know otherwise, and you will know until you know otherwise, don't listen to anything the mind says. It's full of shit. I'm sorry for cousin the name, but like, it's not your friend. And when it is, then that will be known, when it's allowed to be in this friendly way. Because all thoughts, if you're labeling one as good and one as bad, even if you know, okay, I don't control my thoughts, but there's still a labeling of thoughts as being good or bad, then there's a foothold. There's a foothold for the mind or the ego to work its way into. And even in the case here, it was like, again, was felt like I was getting closer to it. And then the mind would be like, oh, we're really getting this non-duality thing. Let's just read another page. Let's just read another book. Oh, this person has another video, coming out. And it was that, like, almost like clawing towards getting it. And the mind you can just assume that the mind doesn't ever stop doing that. And so if you can just allow it to run, like a loving but noisy roommate, then there's at least I feel maybe that there's maybe a greater chance at finding peace. And so when I say you should meditate, it's because anyone that's listening that's like, I need to figure out something to do, someone can hear that and be like, screw you, man. You're not supposed to be given techniques. Everything is what it is, and that's totally true. But if someone is looking for something to do, start by sitting quietly, because that is. I still meditate. I still start every day meditating, but I also every day doing the things that the character chores, the Noel stuff that happens. Taking breaks from doing that is just sitting quietly and being, and the only way to really describe it is just love and gratitude for what is, for everything arising, just sitting here and again, this is just thoughts labeling this apparent experience, but I don't care. I'm not trying to not label it as an experience, but just sitting in the space of being and being like, this is a miracle. Thank you. To what like, there's no thing outside to be thanking, so so here on your show, I'm saying meditate. You don't have to. You don't. Nobody needs to. It's not a thing. It's okay. You will or you won't. But it just keeps coming up where I'm like, if you can't sit and allow your thoughts to be, as they arise for any number of minutes a day, then what do you think this is going to be like late at some point later? Um, and there's no interest in converting or convincing or promoting. Like there is no. It doesn't matter if someone says, you know, if someone says you're wrong, you shouldn't tell people to meditate, because how could that ever be bad advice anyway? Telling someone to sit quietly.
How about if someone is trying to give up meditation after listening to some of the speakers, that they feel they have to give up their practice or meditation to be able to get this?
I would say that's its own meditation. You know, that's its own form of meditation. The life is a meditation, basically. If we're just walking around, walking around in these meat avatars, pretending we control things, and then when you can get to this place of seeing that it is just happening and unfolding, and you are all of it. That is the meditation, basically. So yeah, I don't. I know some people that I've worked with that don't meditate anymore. Like they say, well, I don't need to, and I'm like, I didn't know you needed to do anything anyway. Nobody needs to do anything. But yeah, the I don't need to meditate, or I'm trying to not meditate, is its own. That's just another technique, another concept. So it's no better or worse than meditation or just focusing on the breath, or yoga or plant medicine or any other technique that arises. No judgments one way or the other.
What was your experience like organizing this Nothing conference after coordinating with so many different speakers? What did you learn from that experience?
So the idea came up for it, and then I just sort of put it away for months, because I was making these videos, and even the videos during the making of them, I just was like, I don't know what's the point of these. Like, it was sort of this weird thing where, like, I didn't really want to be in front of the camera, but I just felt this like interest in sharing. And so the conference kind of came up. It was well before all the pandemic stuff happened, and I really thought it was just going to be kind of a couple of speakers, and then I met Emerson, who is sort of like my main other partner, I guess, in now with some other folks, and he's just this like really awesome, bubbly, super nice guy, and reached out to me and just said, hey, I saw your videos and I like the way that you talk about this. Like, are you like anything? He basically was like, anything that you are you doing anything beyond this? I want to help. And so I kind of was like, okay, well, I'll let you know, but I don't really know how much longer I'm going to do these videos. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, hey, I called him and said, hey, what do you think about this? And then it kind of coincided with a project that he was going to start, and so it kind of snowballed, really. I mean, we really it started small and then kind of got big. And the thing that I learned about it was that because we sort of just let it unfold the way that it was, is that we did all of the hardest parts first, like 2 days, 12 hours, two live streams, 40 speakers in different, countries. It was a lot of work. But I would say the thing that I learned about it the most was that, and this is the reason why we kind of kept on with it, is that it became apparent that the non-duality scene, if you will, was sort of made up of all these like individual like lineages. And I don't want to say lineages in a way that like that's how it's all set up. It is almost like these columns. like there's this speaker and they write these books and they have their things. And so, and I shouldn't even have started with lineages because I don't want people to go like, oh yeah, I get it, you know, Ramana Maharshi, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it was like they're in their little columns, and that what the conference was actually doing was bringing this big group of, in this pure non-duality, but not non-duality as a spiritual sideshow, you know, or a sideshow in some spirituality conference or consciousness conference or anything else. Again, no judgments, but we actually heard when some of the speakers started saying, yes, we heard people say, I can't believe you got them to speak because they won't speak at conferences. But I think that they saw where we were coming from with it and saw that we were trying to, as much as possible, showcase different flavors of non-duality. And then the learning experience from that was, for here, was actually I really enjoyed collaborating more. In fact, some of the other organizers that were putting it on, they said you should speak. You should also speak at the conference. And I was like, look, the conference is the expression. The work that's going into it and the love that's going into it is me speaking at it. You know, that's enough. That's enough. It's not for the promotion of Noel as a speaker, author, or anything like that. And it's just been more fun. Like some weeks coming up with the content for the videos and figuring out like what's going on here. It just felt like I made it as easy as possible, but it still felt like more difficult. And now with this, it's just so fun to watch it unfold. But but seeing that there was this place that it could exist to help, like our tagline is amplifying the speakers of what is. So you could use the word promote if you want, but like really assisting in speakers and authors get their word out. You know, some have jobs and they just talk or they just write, and some do it as a full-time thing. And so the interest is in, I guess, assisting and making it a place for people that are seeking or want more information about it to find. Maybe they have a speaker or an author that they like, and then they find out about it through this, and then they can discover and find some more. But I also really learned a lot about more about Zoom technology and conferencing and scheduling and things like that. That part of it was fun. But it's just been it's just been lovely to meet, and it's just such a for the most part, it's such a lovely group of people to talk to, because there's for the most part, there's no like stickiness about the business or or even the marketing side of it or the stuff that has to go. So I end up kind of wearing the business hat of, you know, of it, and keeping things, you know, going. But I'm not, I wouldn't call it a get rich industry. Or a get rich move. In fact, it appears that most of the more popular speakers and authors don't use non-duality as a label at all. They're just talking about now or what is or whatever. And so we want to, non-duality is a part of it in terms of like making sure that people understand. Again, I'm back to that sort of some non-duality fans are kind of snobby about stuff. And so we even talk about, it was funny to try to market an event like this. You know, if you're marketing any other event, you could say you're selling what people will get by attending. Like, you know, like, oh, you like, you know, are you bad at business? Come to this and you'll be better at business. And it's like, we're not, like, to be true to the actual project, we can't even make any claims like that, like, which ended up, I think, being why we called it the Nothing Conference, because like there's nothing to get. None of it's serious, none of it's necessary, it doesn't need to happen, and it'll happen anyway, you know. So yeah, there was a just more the being able to do it and realize again that well, and the other thing is, sorry, I'm like tripping over my words, but it also helped solidify why I even started making the YouTube videos in the first place, because the whole thing was kind of unusual. It was I in the small town that I live in, there's no like non-duality meetups. I was on some, I would look on the internet and I didn't really feel like being on any sort of like message boards or groups or anything like that. And so I just started talking. And then that, with it put out there, then I started getting emails and having more conversations. And then that's sort of what led to this other thing happening. And so I can even see the energetic thread of like, oh, it's really uncomfortable for you to be the person on the camera saying that stuff, but then that led you to meet this person and meet these other great people. And so now it is this thing, but I don't even put that much weight into the story of this cause and effect, like this happened and this other thing happened. It just kind of ends up being an interesting story of looking back and seeing how quickly it appears that everything happened and the way that it took place. Because we could have said, I could have just on my own invited a couple people and like, I don't know who you are and I don't know what this is about. And it could have been this like total dud. And that probably would have been fine too. But now it's, you know, now it's a thing. Now it feels fun to work with some of these speakers and give them these channels. And we get a lot of really good feedback from people saying, thank you guys so much for, they recognize how much work goes into organizing and doing it. And so if it's not fun anymore, we probably won't keep doing it.
Yeah, it's really challenging to describe these kind of videos or events. Sometimes even when I'm titling some of these videos, I don't know what to say, like, what to call it.
Yeah, makes sense. And certainly to you can, you know, if you're trying to get on Google's or YouTube's algorithms to be found, then that's a whole other thing. That'd be a game in and of itself. But yeah, I think again, coming back to you can't really do it wrong. It's like whatever comes up, however it expresses itself, then that's okay. And so you can just only do what feels, do the next right thing, and then see what happens.
I'm really amazed that people do engage in this type of content. When I first started, I didn't think that, I thought that it may be too abstract and maybe, but people do engage a lot in this. I was surprised by that.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, and you've spoken to some really good, you know, speakers and authors. So I think that's that ends up kind of speaking for itself.
It's and also I think although it doesn't change anything, it changes everything. It's
yeah.
It's so odd. Like it's hard to describe. Like you don't get anything, but it's the ultimate freedom.
Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah. It's that, I mean, there's so many paradoxes, but it is profound and yet so ordinary and so simple. And so what ends up happening is that I always laugh at how really it just comes down to not saying anything, just comes down to silence. And it can't really be described in words. And yet look at all the words that have been written about it. and all the words that have been spoken about it in an attempt to describe what is. It's really, really wonderful. And it's no surprise that words have been written and spoken, and these attempts have been made to describe it, because it really is wonderful, and yet it's at the same time that it is so ordinary and so simple.
I also wanted to ask you about, at the beginning of the interview, you brought it up that you used to visualize things, and I wonder if this seeing changed your views on things like law of attraction, or Kundalini experiences. Did anything change? Like, how do you see those ideas now?
Yeah. So the law of attraction, I did a video a while ago on the law of attraction, and again, so I'll just preface it by saying, like, I don't have any judgments about anything that makes people, that brings people peace or makes them feel like it will bring them peace. But the law of attraction was definitely, like, in terms of visualization and stating things a certain way. And I was, for a little while, I was into the law of attraction. I don't want to say scene, but like I would read about it and things like that. And I would see people that were clearly suffering and wanted a way out. They thought that whatever it is that they wanted, that they thought that was going to bring them peace. And I saw additional suffering because they felt as if that what they were doing wasn't right. I'm not doing law of attraction right, and so the way that this shifted is that there's a bug here in software. There's a bug and it's a permanent bug in the law of attraction, and it's that it starts with the base point that everything is not okay, that everything as it is not enough. You can't say, I love my life and how it is, but I also want a bigger house, or I also want, everything's perfect. And then people will go, well, no, this is like perfect law of attraction kind of speak, is they'll go, no, you don't say but, you say and. I love the way my life is, and it's like, no, that's just verbal gymnastics. And so again, nothing wrong with it. Go like visualize, do your vision board, do all those different things, but whatever verbal or mental gymnastics you want to play with on it, everything is perfect as it is, full stop. It doesn't need to be anything more. And so the idea that something else, something in the future, some other event, some other thing, some relationship will make things better, has to start with the base point of, like, this isn't good enough. And the other part of it that's almost kind of comical is, like, thinking that something in the future will make me happier is in some ways laughable, because it's like, you don't know what's good for you. You really don't. You think you do because thoughts arise and they like, I want to do whatever, or that would be fun. But think of all the times that you wanted something to be a way and it was, and it sucked, or you wanted something to be a way and it wasn't, and it was actually better that it didn't happen the way as visualized. And so giving this idea that that we should visualize, and that we're, that we are, I'm not denying that we are the creators here, but that we're creating this universe or this world that we want, and giving that oxygen that there is some sort of mechanical way of going about that. I think under the premise that everything isn't perfect as it is, it just doesn't fit anymore. Like, it doesn't work here anyway. So it's in fact, there were I think it got some criticism, but I noticed, I want to say like 6 months ago or 8 months ago, I saw that Eckhart Tolle was holding a seminar on the law of attraction, and I was like, what? Okay, whatever, you know. But then I thought, how amazing would that be if all these people, these law of attraction, signed up for Eckhart Tolle's law of attraction seminar and left the seminar realizing that the real way to be happiness was just to not want all that crap. Like it was like a honeypot, you know. And you can even see how it maybe played out in the business sense. Like some marketing people did some search engine, you know, they did some research and figured out that lots of people like law of attraction. Ooh, it'd be great. Let's see what Eckhart thinks about the law of attraction. But but a lot of people, I heard anyway, that some people were like kind of bummed out by that. They're like, how this goes against blah, blah, blah. And it's like, whatever, you know. It's like on the business side of things, and maybe the seminar was great. I have no idea. I wasn't going to sign up for it, but it was showing up on my Instagram feed as an ad. And so it was in there, and then, you know, there was a thought about it. But it's like you can just say, and it sounds so silly, but the best way to find happiness in stuff is just to realize that you don't need it. It's that the stuff, the events, these things, they're wholly unnecessary. They're not needed for any sort of happiness. They're not needed for wholeness. And sometimes that's easier said than done, I guess, for some characters. Some need to get to those points and have all the things, and then realize that, oh man, okay, this isn't it. You know, this wasn't it. Or to get to some spiritual level. Let's not even talk about objects and, you know, and things, but get to some level of spirituality and be like, you know, oh, this isn't it either. I still have, you know, I still have anxiety. I still have stress. I still get mad. I still get frustrated. I get sad. And it just, to me, again, just non-duality just ends up being a useful, you know, a useful marker or label to put on something. But this direct path of, hey, why not allowing all of it, allowing the sadness, even the sadness and the frustration and the thoughts arising of like, wow, this isn't it either. Like, if that's all allowed, then I think Alan Watts famously said, you know, an anxious mind allowed to be anxious is, you know, it's perfectly stated to not be the case, or perfectly set to not be the case. Like, if anxiety is allowed, then the allowance of it kind of takes away the power that it has, because the suffering from anxiety oftentimes comes from not wanting it to be, you know, not wanting to be around. I wish there was something else. I wish I didn't feel this way. And I don't want to speak on or attempt to speak on, you know, people that have panic attacks or ongoing anxiety, because there's not a lot of big experience here. But there were moments where those things took place, like 4 times a year it would happen, but it was always when something good was happening. It was never something bad. It was always when some good event had happened, and then the mind would be like, don't get too excited. This can't last, you know, or, you know, how do we keep this up? You know, the mind, like, we don't deserve this, that kind of thing. And then it just ended up, now it's sadness, frustration, joy, anxiety. It's all allowed. There's no interest or attempt to make it go away, or to be positive or be happy all the time. And that's the same with stuff. There are no desires. There's nothing to fix. That, to me, that's the ultimate freedom. I don't want anything. I don't want or need anything. And what could be more freeing than that?
And I think it's similar also. It's kind of applicable even to like some of these experiences, Kundalini experiences or blissful experiences, you feel really high in that moment, but it goes high and then it goes low. So
yeah, and those are okay, but the search for this is another form of seeking, you know. It's another form of seeking, and where I live, you know, in Costa Rica, there's lots of retreats, and you know, and there's plant medicine and different ceremonies and things like this. There's nothing wrong, you know, with doing those. It's that the mind will then make those a thing, or make that Kundalini experience this attainable place that needs to be, or that should be, or hey, I don't, you know, I don't need it, but it's fun to go there every once in a while, and that's okay too. Like, it just all ends up being enjoying the ride. It's that when that stickiness is added to it as a an interest to sustain it or do it more often or make it permanent, that's just the mind creating trouble.
And I want to be mindful about your time, Noel. So this is my last question.
Okay.
I would love to know about if you had any after effects of this seeing. Like, were there any changes that apparently happened in your life? Like maybe like more peace, or were there any after effects for you?
Yeah, I mean, certainly everything's okay. Everything's allowed. Everything's perfect. It's like it sounds, I mean, that's a pretty, like, that's $1 million answer. Like, everything's perfect, you know, but it's not that everything is perfect. It is, but it's not that mindset is maintained. It's that it's just that there is more, there's just everything just is this. It can't be anything else. So it's not even that any convincing is needed for that to be the case. It's that the it never goes very long before that reminder comes up again, if that makes sense. And so I think if I would say that the expectations that were had, you know, like I really did. I felt like when I was really hard seeking on this, I was like, oh, you know, it's gonna be so great to be like floating a foot above the ground, you know. And in fact, the opposite is what has made things so beautiful. Like, feeling that nothing would faze me. That's a stupid ride. Like, that's not a fun or interesting way for things to be. Being phased is part of the human experience. Getting upset, getting sad, like, being happy, being joyful, just any emotions and things that arise, however they are, that is the beauty, that is the freedom. Not this, like, nothing's gonna bother me anymore after I figure this out. There was definitely the fear of not caring about people and the roles that Noel has in life, this character. But I've even had to, like, there's still care, there's still love, so more love, actually, more understanding, no judgments. And yet I've even, speaking of law of attraction, like when law of attraction was this big thing, it was like I would trip over my own thoughts to be like, you didn't phrase that thought right, you know. Like, don't say I need, say I want. And it's just like, what are you doing? It's just the mind, blah blah blah, you know, just doing its thing. Well, I do in some cases in social scenarios. Like, I change now. Instead of saying I don't care, because I kind of don't most things, I say I don't mind. And I say I don't mind because that's a softer, more acceptable response to, like, it doesn't matter. But what I'm actually also telling myself is I'm not giving any power to the mind. The mind's not at play here. It's not making a distinction of this. Yeah, there might be preferences. If someone says, I went to a gelato shop last night, I talked about it earlier, like, there's all these flavors. Well, I made choices. I could have just said, I don't mind, pick whatever. That could have been interesting or fun too, but I still chose a flavor. So this I don't care, I don't mind thing has been interesting, because I found that I just found it to be a little easier in terms of these like social settings, because in relationships, and with loved ones, if in my marriage, if I say I don't care a lot, then I'm the guy that doesn't care, and it doesn't bode very well. I just look like someone that doesn't care, but it's not. So I don't mind ends up being is like the new phrase. And yet I'm trying to think of the last time that I did mind something that, that someone asked a question and I did care about something. But I think that the having these expectations and then realizing that I heard this saying the other week, expectations are the thieves of joy. It's just so true. Like, oops, sorry, I totally flicked my thing. Having expectations of what it would be like, and then realizing that what is end up being discovered is that there are no expectations. I think it's probably been one of the I'll label it as one of the best things about it, because then any situation that happens, that any apparent situation that happens in this movie, in this game that's being played, any outcome that arises, including the natural response to that, being bummed out because something didn't happen or whatever, and then being like, well, I really felt bummed out, like, observing that. Suppose I could think of others, but that's one that sort of came up for me when you asked. The no desires, nothing to fix, everything, acceptance of everything. And sometimes it's not acceptance of everything in real time. Sometimes there is, oh, I didn't want that particular outcome, but it just doesn't hang. And it's allowed to hang, but it just doesn't. It's like, oh, well, this is how it went, because this is how it was supposed to go, and it couldn't have been any other way.
Does it match with your seeking days when you were looking for liberation? Does this match with the definition that you were looking for back then?
That's a great question. So I will say that the thing that seemed to bug me the most was the sort of qualifier, not really qualifier, but the description that, like, and it's just so ordinary and so simple. I'd be like, that can't be true. The ordinary and so simple, how can that be true? Because if it was so simple and so ordinary, like, then I would get it by now. But that ends up being, I would say, so ridiculously true. Like, because it is just so simple and so ordinary. Like, it's just this. It's beautiful as it is. It doesn't. It can't be more complex. It can't be better. It just is. And so that was I would say, if anything, that was like the thing where that being said over and over again, like, created, like, I'd be frustrated. Like, how can you say it's so simple and so ordinary, and yet, like, that's really, really such a true statement. It's such a true description of it. But I had kind of big expectations of it, and I suppose that it's probably just fine that they weren't met in that regard, because they weren't going to be anyway.
But ironically, those big expectations are limited.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Beautifully stated. Yeah, because they're just there are these constructs that are made up, and you can even look at situations where you're like, you look at situations or events that have happened in life where, like, you didn't think anything and it ended up being amazing. And it was like, because it's perhaps it's because you didn't have any expectations of what something was supposed to be. Like, is what made them, you know, it was what opened things up. I mean, it's I'm not trying to attach meaning to any of those things, but and it's really not this isn't a suggestion that no expectations is some new philosophy and the way that it is. But to your point, which I shouldn't even have, you know, added to because it was perfect as you said it. But yeah, the expectations end up being limiting in that regard because they're just something that just comes up out of the mind from nowhere, going nowhere, but then the mind wants to attach some importance to them and state, oh, when these expectations are met, then peace, you know, then we'll find peace. And it just never ends up being the case. You know, it's you get there and it's like, well, yeah, okay, but you know, it's that yeah, but game again. Yeah, but yeah, I got this, but now it'd be better if this other thing happened. Or in other, you know, other scenarios, it's yeah, now I got this. Well, how do I keep up this? How do I keep up this ruse? Mine's really good at what it does. It's been doing it for a while.
Is there anything you would like to share today? If I missed anything,
No. I mean, I didn't know what we would talk about, but it's been lovely speaking with you. Yeah, I would say just, you know, in terms of if there's like a plug, I would just plug the nothing.fm for anyone that's gotten this far in the video that is saying, okay, you know, I like what is being spoken about here, and where can I find more information about these things? I wouldn't even, I'd plug that before I would plug my own website on it, because I feel like it's just been more fun to schedule and work with all these other speakers and provide people with ways to find all these different flavors and see what resonates with them. And if after watching this, nobody needs anything, then I think that we've done really well here.
And this conference, is it like an ongoing thing that that's going to continue?
I think, yeah, we've talked about it. We'd probably do another one like this year, but the project that it's taken now is now we're just doing more regular like live meetings, and we do retreats, virtual retreats. And we've sort of fashioned like a digital TV show. So we've invited all these speakers, a lot of them from the Nothing Conference, to have a show, and we've given them the choice. They can do a live meeting or they can do a recorded, and most of them are choosing live. So yeah, they just pick a day of the month. We have every Friday there's a meeting. We now have all Wednesdays and then almost all Tuesdays. So there's like multiple live meetings per week. And then we've been doing the virtual retreats, and people seem to find those enjoyable as well, like a little more intimate, you know, the like 50 to 150 attendees and stuff like that. But on nothing.fm, just the live meetings, everything, the virtual retreats cost money, but the meetings and stuff are free. And then the host has like a donate button that goes to wherever their Patreon or their PayPal. So just trying to be of service and help out.
I'll leave a link for both the conference as well as your website, absoluteawareness.org.
Yeah, absoluteawareness.org. And then the conference is nothingcon.com. But if you go to nothing.fm, then there's a link to the conference there as well. So
thank you so much, Noel. I really appreciate it.
It's good talking to you, Suma. Thank you.